Under the golden skies of California, a blind date gone wrong leads to something unexpectedly beautiful. When Claire's wheelchair breaks, a gentle mechanic named Jake steps in, not just to fix it, but to heal a heart that had forgotten how to trust. What begins in a noisy garage soon turns into a quiet love story, one about second chances, kindness, and finding connection in the most unexpected places. Like, share, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Now let's get started. It was supposed to be the perfect evening in Los Angeles. Claire had spent nearly an hour getting ready, choosing a navy blue dress that framed her shoulders gracefully and a pair of silver earrings that sparkled under the soft apartment lights. Her blonde hair fell in loose curls, and for the first time in weeks, she looked at her reflection and smiled. After 2 years of living with a wheelchair following a car accident, she had slowly rebuilt her confidence. Tonight was meant to be special. A blind date arranged by her best friend, Megan. He's charming, polite, and handsome, Megan had promised. Claire wanted to believe that maybe, finally, she could feel normal again. She arrived at the cozy downtown café early, rolling her wheelchair through the glass doors with quiet confidence. The place smelled of fresh coffee and vanilla pastries. Small lights hung across the ceiling like stars, and couples filled the tables, their laughter soft and sweet. Claire chose a table near the window, her heart fluttering with both hope and fear. She adjusted her lap blanket, checked her phone, and waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. And just when she started to doubt he would come, she saw him, Ryan, tall, dark-haired, with a sharp suit and an expensive watch. He looked every bit the gentleman Megan had described. Ryan approached with a confident smile, but something in his eyes gave Claire pause, a flicker of discomfort, as if her wheelchair were an unexpected detail in an otherwise perfect evening. "Claire?" he asked, forcing a grin as he sat across from her. "Wow, you look great," she smiled politely, pushing aside her doubts. They ordered coffee, and the conversation began awkwardly. Ryan talked mostly about himself, his job, his car, his gym routine. Whenever Claire mentioned her work in marketing or her volunteer projects, he nodded absently, eyes drifting to his phone. The real blow came when he laughed and said, "I've never actually dated someone in a wheelchair before. Must be challenging, huh?" His tone was light, but his words hit like a punch to the chest. Claire froze, unsure how to respond. "It's not really that different," she replied quietly, trying to keep her composure. He shrugged, sipping his coffee. "Yeah, but it must make things complicated. Restaurants, travel, you know." Claire felt her throat tighten. She wanted to leave, but pride kept her rooted. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her hurt. Minutes crawled by. The laughter from nearby tables only made the silence between them heavier. When Ryan excused himself to take a call, Claire exhaled, her heart sinking. She looked out the window, where the city lights blurred into golden streaks. She remembered what Megan had said about giving love another chance, about not letting her injury define her. But now, sitting there, she felt like every eye in the café could see the invisible weight she carried. When Ryan returned, he suggested ending the evening early. "I've got an early meeting tomorrow," he said, barely meeting her gaze. Claire nodded, pretending not to care. She turned her wheelchair toward the exit, ready to roll away from this humiliating night. But as she approached the door, the chair suddenly jerked to a stop. The right wheel jammed, refusing to move. She tried again, harder. Nothing. Her chest tightened with panic. People glanced at her, murmuring softly but not moving to help. Ryan stood nearby, shifting awkwardly, unsure what to do. "Maybe you should call someone," he said finally. His tone was indifferent, almost impatient. Claire's face flushed. Her hands trembled on the wheels. She could feel tears threatening to rise, but she swallowed them back. "It's fine," she muttered, trying again. The wheel creaked but didn't budge. She wished she could disappear right there, melt into the tile floor, escape the stairs. Her perfect evening had turned into a cruel joke. Then, amid the quiet chaos, a new voice broke through. "Need a hand?" It was calm, low, and kind. Claire looked up to see a man kneeling beside her chair, a mechanic by the look of him. His shirt was grey and slightly stained with oil, his hands rough but steady. His name patch read Jake. He was around 31, maybe, with light stubble and kind brown eyes that carried no judgment, only concern. "Looks like the bearing's caught," he said, inspecting the wheel. "Mind if I take a look?" Claire hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Jake worked with practiced precision, his movements confident but gentle. Within seconds, he pulled a small wrench from his tool belt. Apparently, he'd just come from his auto shop nearby. The sound of the tool turning filled the tense silence, and slowly the jammed wheel began to move again. There we go," he said softly. "Good as new." She blinked, surprised. "You fixed it? Just like that?" He smiled. "That's what I do. Fix broken things." There was no pity in his voice, no awkwardness, just quiet warmth. Claire couldn't help but smile for the first time that night. Ryan stood a few feet away, looking irritated and out of place. "You all set?" he asked, clearly eager to leave. Claire looked up at him and then back at Jake, who was wiping his hands on a rag. "Yeah," she said slowly, "I think I am." Jake stepped back but lingered just long enough to make sure she could move smoothly. "You might want to get that wheel checked soon. I can take a better look if you stop by my shop. Jake's Auto on Lincoln." His words were casual, but his tone carried genuine care. Claire felt something unexpected stir inside her. Gratitude, curiosity, maybe even hope. "Thank you," she said softly. "Really?" He nodded with an easy grin. "Any time." As she rolled out into the cool Los Angeles night, she realized her heart felt lighter. Ryan muttered something about calling her later, but she barely heard him. Her mind was still on the man who had knelt without hesitation, who had seen her not as a burden, but as a person. The mechanic who had stepped into a disaster of a night, and without even knowing it, had repaired more than just a broken wheel. The city hummed around her, cars passing, lights glowing, life continuing. But inside her, something had shifted. She had come out looking for romance and found disappointment. Yet in the middle of it all, she had also found a moment of grace, a glimpse of kindness that made her believe that not everyone would see her as fragile. Maybe, she thought, the right people come when everything else falls apart. That night, as Claire wheeled herself into her apartment, she replayed the moment in her mind, the sound of Jake's voice, the steadiness in his eyes. It'd been just a few minutes, but it was enough to make her wonder if fate had quietly rewritten her story right there. Between spilled coffee, broken wheels, and a kind stranger who refused to walk away. The next morning, sunlight streamed through Claire's apartment window, painting soft patterns on the wooden floor. She sat quietly at her breakfast table, her coffee growing cold as her mind drifted back to the night before. Every detail replayed, the embarrassment, Ryan's shallow words, and then Jake's calm voice breaking through the noise. She could still remember the way he'd knelt beside her, unbothered by the stairs, treating her wheelchair like any other machine in need of care. Something about that moment had stayed with her, like a flicker of light in a long tunnel. She didn't know why it mattered so much, but it did. Later that afternoon, she couldn't resist searching Jake's Auto Lincoln Boulevard online. The shop wasn't far from her office in Santa Monica, and the reviews painted him as a skilled mechanic known for honesty and kindness. One even mentioned how he'd once repaired a customer's mobility scooter free of charge. Claire smiled at the thought. Maybe she could visit just to thank him properly and to get her wheelchair checked, of course. That seemed like a good enough excuse, she told herself, even if her heart was already making other plans. By noon, she found herself outside Jake's Auto, a modest garage with a big blue sign and the smell of oil and fresh paint in the air. Inside, she saw him, sleeves rolled up, wiping grease from his hands, music playing softly from an old radio. When he noticed her at the door, his face lit up with recognition. "Well, look who it is," he said warmly. "Wheel still running smooth?" She laughed. "Yes, though I figured I'd better take you up on that inspection offer. Just to be safe." He nodded approvingly. "Good call. Bring her in." As Jake worked, Claire watched quietly. There was something mesmerizing about the way he moved, focused, patient, and steady. He didn't rush or make small talk to fill the silence. Instead, he treated her wheelchair with the same care he might give a classic car. When he finally straightened up, wiping his hands again, he said, "You take good care of this chair. But the right bearing's worn down. I can replace it if you'd like." She agreed, and while he worked, they began to talk. He told her about growing up in Arizona, fixing cars with his father since he was 12, and how he'd opened this shop 5 years ago after moving to Los Angeles. "I like working with my hands," he said. "Machines make sense. You fix what's broken and they work again. People, not always that easy." Claire smiled softly. "Maybe not, but sometimes it's the people who fix us." Without even realizing it, he glanced up at her, and for a moment their eyes met in a silence that said more than words could. When the repair was done, Jake refused payment. "Consider it on the house," he said. "You've had enough bad luck lately." She tried to insist, but he shook his head with a grin. "You can buy me a coffee sometime instead." Claire felt her heart skip. "Deal," she replied, hiding her smile. As she left, she felt lighter than she had in months. Something about Jake's easy kindness had begun to heal a part of her that she hadn't realized was still hurting. Over the next few days, their paths kept crossing. Once she stopped by his shop to bring him coffee as promised, and they ended up talking for an hour about music and movies. Another time, he helped her adjust the height of her wheelchair handles. With every meeting, their connection deepened. Jake never looked at her with pity. He treated her as an equal, someone strong and capable. For Claire, it was refreshing, almost foreign. He never asked about her accident or the things she'd lost. Instead, he focused on who she was now, and that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. One Friday evening, Jake invited her to a local charity event hosted by a friend who ran a motorcycle club. "They're raising money for mobility equipment for veterans," he explained. Claire hesitated, unsure she'd fit in, but he insisted gently. "You'll love it, and it's for a good cause." She agreed, and that night, dressed in a soft leather jacket and jeans, she rolled beside him into the glowing lights of the event. The smell of barbecue filled the air, laughter echoed, and for once she didn't feel out of place. Jake introduced her to his friends, and everyone treated her with warmth and respect. Later, as they stood near the bonfire, she watched the flames flicker against his face. "You know," she said, "you're not what I expected when I think of a mechanic." He chuckled. "What, you thought I'd be rough around the edges?" She smirked. "A little," he shrugged. "Maybe I am, but I also believe that fixing things, cars, chairs, hearts, it's all kind of the same. You just have to care enough to try." His words struck something deep within her. She realized then that the way he looked at life was exactly how she wanted to look at it again. As the night went on, their laughter mingled with the music and firelight. Jake pushed her wheelchair gently through the grass, careful with every bump, and when a slow song began to play, he surprised her by asking, "Can I have this dance?" She laughed, thinking he was joking, but he simply placed his hands on the back of her chair and began to sway it lightly to the rhythm. It was silly, sweet, and perfect. For the first time in years, Claire felt free, not defined by her wheelchair, but by the joy of being seen, wanted, and alive. When Jake drove her home, the air between them felt charged with unspoken feelings. At her door, she turned to him and said, "Thank you for tonight, for everything." He looked at her for a long moment before replying, "You don't need to thank me, Claire. You're easy to care about." His words left her speechless. After he left, she sat by the window, heart racing, realizing that she was falling for him, slowly, deeply, and without fear. Over the next few weeks, they spent more time together. Jake even designed small upgrades for her wheelchair, new tires, smoother controls, and a better cushion. "You deserve comfort," he said simply when she tried to protest. She began visiting his shop just to talk, bringing lunch or sharing stories from work. He teased her about her caffeine addiction. She teased him about his country music playlists. Little by little, their lives started to intertwine like gears in perfect motion. But one afternoon, when Claire's old feelings of insecurity resurfaced, She almost ruined it all. They were at a café when an older couple stared at her chair, whispering. She froze, self-conscious again. Jake noticed instantly. "Ignore them," he said softly, but she shook her head. "You don't get it," she whispered. "People always see this first. It's exhausting." Jake leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Then let them. Because the right people don't see a chair. They see you. And you're worth seeing, Claire." His words broke through her doubt like sunlight through clouds. She smiled faintly, realizing that Jake didn't just fix what was broken. He reminded people that they weren't broken at all. That night, when she returned home, she replayed his voice in her head. She knew something was changing between them. The walls she'd built around her heart were slowly falling, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel afraid of what came next. A few weeks passed, and life for Claire began to feel different, warmer, brighter, and filled with small reasons to smile. She found herself looking forward to Jake's messages, his quick visits to her office with lunchboxes wrapped in brown paper, and the sound of his laughter that somehow made even the dullest day feel alive. Every time he entered a room, it was like he carried a piece of sunlight with him. She often caught herself thinking about him late at night, replaying their conversations, wondering how someone so simple could make her heart feel so full. One Saturday morning, she was surprised by a message from Jake. "Can you come to the shop this afternoon? I've got something to show you." Curious and excited, she rolled down Lincoln Boulevard under the soft California sun until the blue sign of Jake's auto came into view. The garage door was half open, and she could hear faint music playing inside. Jake stood there, grinning like a kid with a secret. "Close your eyes," he said, guiding her gently forward. When she opened them again, she gasped. Before her stood a completely refurbished wheelchair, sleek, lightweight, and beautifully customized. The frame was metallic silver with subtle blue accents, and the seat looked more comfortable than any she'd ever had. "Jake," she whispered, unable to hide her shock. "You didn't." He smiled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I did, built it myself. Stronger wheels, smoother control, and a few custom details, like this." He pressed a small button, and the chair softly adjusted its height. Claire's eyes welled up. "You built this for me?" He nodded, a bit shyly. "I wanted you to have something that moves as freely as you deserve to." She felt her throat tighten, tears slipping down her cheeks before she could stop them. "No one's ever done something like this for me," she said quietly. Jake looked at her, his expression gentle. "You've been through enough. You shouldn't have to struggle with the little things too." She reached out and touched his hand, her voice trembling. "You have no idea what this means." He squeezed her fingers softly. "Actually, I think I do." The silence that followed was soft and full of feeling, the kind that didn't need words to explain. Over the next few days, Claire couldn't stop smiling. Every time she used the new wheelchair, she thought of Jake, his kindness, his patience, and the way he looked at her like she wasn't defined by what she'd lost, but by what she still carried inside. Her co-workers noticed the change too. "You seem happier," Megan said one morning with a knowing grin. Claire just laughed. "Maybe I am," she replied. But deep down she knew it wasn't maybe. It was because. One evening, Jake invited her to dinner near the beach. The restaurant had wide doors and open patios overlooking the Pacific. The air smelled of salt and sea breeze. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jake reached across the table and said, "You know, when I met you that night, I thought I was just fixing a wheel. Turns out I was fixing my own life too." She laughed softly. "You're not serious." "Completely," he replied. "You reminded me what it means to care again." After dinner, they took a slow walk along the boardwalk. The waves crashed gently against the shore, and the night air felt cool against their skin. "It's funny," Claire said after a while, her voice quiet but full of emotion. "That blind date was supposed to be one of the worst nights of my life." Jake chuckled. "Guess it had to go wrong before something could go right." She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "You really think so?" "I know so," he replied. "Sometimes life breaks down just so you can rebuild it stronger." They stopped near a street musician playing guitar, uni. Something so bad turned into something so good. Claire nodded, smiling faintly. It's strange, isn't it? How life surprises you when you least expect it. Jake reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, folded note. "Open it," he said. Inside, in his neat handwriting, were the words, "Every wheel deserves to turn again, and so does every heart." Her throat tightened as she read it. He smiled shyly. "I was hoping we could keep turning together, you and me." She felt her chest fill with warmth as she whispered, "I'd like that." Outside, the rain began to ease, the clouds parting to reveal the soft glow of evening light. They stepped out together, the city lights reflecting in the wet pavement like tiny stars. Jake held her hand as they moved through the street, their laughter echoing against the quiet hum of the night. Claire realized then that what Jake had given her went far beyond a new wheelchair or repaired bearings. He'd given her back something she thought she'd lost forever. Her belief that love could find her even when she'd stopped looking. Months later, they would look back on that night at the café and laugh. What had begun as a disaster had turned into the beginning of everything beautiful. Jake often teased her about how she'd almost rolled right past her destiny. And she'd reply with a smile, "Good thing you were there with your wrench." He'd grin and say, "Guess I'm not just a mechanic after all." And maybe he wasn't, because while Jake had spent his life fixing cars and machines, what he truly repaired was hearts, starting with hers. And as the seasons changed and their love deepened, Claire came to understand one simple truth. Sometimes the people who appear in the middle of our worst moments are the ones who turn them into the best chapters of our lives. That night, as she sat beside Jake on the beach watching the waves roll in under the starlit sky, she whispered, "You didn't just fix my wheelchair. Jake, you fixed me." He smiled, resting his hand over hers. "No," he said softly, "you were never broken. You just needed someone to remind you how strong you already were." And in that moment, surrounded by the rhythm of the ocean and the quiet hum of love, Claire knew her story had found its perfect ending.